A lot of people do not take time to think about the difference between studying and learning, and it is because of this ignorance that a lot of people engage themselves into countless hours of studying that actually produce no learning. Now, the truth of the matter is the goal of studying, at least in my perspective, is to learn. However, it is not all studying that produces learning, because in order to achieve learning, there are specific things that you have to do in your studying to make sure that you are producing the desired outcome that you want. And one of the things, at least from my own experience and the things I've been reading, is that the power of asking intelligent questions is one of the most underestimated things that you can do as you are studying to make sure that you get the most learning outcome out of your study session. And this is what I'm going to be talking about. So if that is something that is interesting to you, then just stick around. Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Simon, a fifth year medical student at the University of Zambia. And with all of that said, let's get back to the topic for today. So I think the best way to start about this is to think about what is learning. Well, you could define learning in a lot of ways, but I think the definition which can actually make sense is that learning is a change that happens either in terms of your knowledge, your skills, or even your beliefs and attitudes that happens after an experience. Now, the science of learning itself is quite a complex one, and I'll be posting a lot of videos about it to make sure that we can understand some of the science and how we can use practical things and strategies that can actually work to make sure that it produces the desired outcome. However, that's not the purpose of this video, and so I'll share a glimpse here and there about the science of learning to make sure that you understand as to why I think asking intelligent questions is one of the most important things that you can do as you are learning something, especially during your studies. Before I go to the questions, may I just mention that learning itself necessarily is not an all or nothing. So when you are studying, regardless of how poor your studying techniques are, there might be some learning that may be happening. And so it's really a spectrum. So for me, what I'm thinking about is, you're starting from a point of very poor learning to the point of very good learning. So very good learning to the point where you're able to retain the things that you're learning and you're able to apply them to actual practical skills that it has to be applied to. And so the learning that I'm thinking about is for us to continuously move on this higher end of the spectrum where we produce very efficient and meaningful learning, so that we do not waste our time learning things that cannot be used, or learning things that we'll just forget in the next few minutes and then we'll come to relearn the same things over and over again. Now, there are things like inquiry-based learning, learning by discovery, and even this book that I've been reading, How to Read a Book Intelligently, you discover that it always emphasizes the issue of asking questions. Now, what really is a question? Or isn't it ironic that I'm asking you a question about what a question is? Now, you could define a question in any way that you want. However, for the purpose of this video, these are the ways that I want you to think about the question. Number one, a question is a declaration of ignorance and a positioning to receive knowledge. It's a declaration of ignorance and a positioning to receive knowledge. The other things I could think, a question is the primary driving unity for analysis, evaluation, and scrutiny. And maybe this is where I may bring about maybe the cognitive theory of learning. Now, there are a lot of theories of learning, but let me just explain it in the simplest ways that I think will be very important for us to understand. So you see, when you're learning something, let's say for example, you are studying, you're taking in information and taking it to your brain. So it has to pass through your sensory memory, and then it has to go through your working memory, and then go to your long-term memory. Now, when I think about memory, these are not necessarily just storage units. They are more of storage stroke processing units. So now, your working memory, I'll start from that point because I think it's the most important thing. Your working memory is not necessarily limitless. The amount of information that you can keep in your working memory is very limited. And so you want to make sure that you transfer it quickly to your long-term memory. Now, your long-term memory is, at least some scientists say that it is actually unlimited. You can learn as many things as possible. Now, the process of transferring this information that you're learning from your working memory to your long-term memory, this process right here is something that I would want you to think about. Now, at least from the things that I have learned, you discover that there is a process of integration that happens here. This process of integration is where new information is being integrated with prior knowledge to make sure that it can be organized and it can be stored in your long-term memory. If it is there in your long-term memory, it's available for retrieval. You can actually retrieve it when you need to use it, and this is the kind of information that you can actually work with to even solve real life problems. Now, the process of integration that is happening here is not per se 100% understood even in the field of science. However, the things that I can tell you is, if you look at this process of integration, you are integrating new and prior memory. There is an issue of cognition here. So there are thoughts that are happening, and it is these thoughts that are helping you to integrate this new information to the prior knowledge that you have, to make sure that it can be integrated and stored in your long-term memory. Now you can let this go to chance, where you're just reading and reading, hoping that some of the things are integrated with your long-term memory. Or you could actually be very intentional and deliberate to make sure that you facilitate this process of cognition that helps you integrate your new information to your prior knowledge, so that it is integrated and kept in your long-term memory. So how can you do this? This is actually by asking questions. Now, I'm speaking again, it is not as simple as this, but I can promise you, if you understand the skill of asking intelligent questions and you make it a habit during your learning, I can promise you that it would actually produce significantly good results. I've been emphasizing on asking intelligent questions. Well, that is because it is not all questions that are equal, and it is not all questions that are going to drive the same cognitive processes that are happening in your brain. So what kind of question should you ask? Well, this can be simplified. However, I have to mention that it will highly depend on the things that you are reading, and I cannot go into all the specific and different things that you are learning. However, I can give you a model, and I believe you are able to use those specific models to your specific subjects to make sure that it helps you. So the three basic questions that I can tell you is, you have to ask the question what, the question why, and the question how. Okay? So now, the question what, the question why, and the question how, all of them are important. However, they are not just asked haphazardly. They are asked in a specific way to make sure that you are directing your thoughts in a systematic manner. This is hard to explain without an example. So let me just give you a very simple example to show you how asking intelligent questions can help you. Let's say, for example, I was studying a cell. Now, at least from secondary school, a lot of people will be able to understand a cell is a building block of life. So like me, I'm made up of cells. However, you discover that even in the cells, there are specific organelles. So these are the organelles that are making sure that they are working in conjunction to each other to make sure that the cell is alive. So let me give you an example of one organelle. Let's say the mitochondria. So the mitochondria, I'm studying, this is me studying, and then I discover the first question that I'll ask when I see these words, maybe it might actually be a subtitle or even in bold, mitochondria, I might ask myself, what is this? And then when I'm reading that, you discover, okay, it's an organelle in the cell, and what does it do? It produces energy. Well, the question that could come is, at this point, I could decide to just continue reading, or at this point, I can decide to pause and ask a question. Why do we need energy in the first place? Now, these are the kinds of questions that will actually make you activate even your prior knowledge. Maybe I might have understood that, okay, maybe we started with enzymes. Okay, enzymes are biological catalysts. Okay, for a chemical reaction to happen, what do you need? Okay, you need this catalyst. Okay, so maybe energy is needed for this catalyst. How is it needed? Okay, maybe the temperature. By thinking about why energy is important, I'm able to integrate this small piece of information with the things that I know. And peradventure, I actually don't know. These are the times that you can actually use even ChatGPT or Google. You can simply go type, why do we need energy? And then you discover a few things. You may not need to start memorizing every single thing that is happening. But I can promise you that at least understanding as to why you need energy is going to give you a very strong anchor point to even learn the rest. So this means as I continue to learn, the moment that I'm reading things that have to do with the use of energy in a cell, I'll be able to refer back to the mitochondria and say, okay, so all of this is actually possible because the mitochondria is there. And so even as I become a medical student, if I discover that there are some things which suggest that maybe the person does not have energy, I can start thinking of going even to the molecular level of thinking, okay, could this be at the molecular level of affecting the mitochondria? Or maybe I could ask, okay, what are the components that the mitochondria uses to create knowledge? And actually that brings me to the second question. How does the mitochondria make energy? Is it a self-sustaining system? Does it need other things to come? Okay, I discover, okay, it needs glucose and then it needs this and this. Okay, where do we get glucose? Okay, it's food. Oh, if someone does not eat, then they will lose energy. It seems very obvious, but the more you think of this, you create this network of information in your brain that is not necessarily the strict facts, but integrated knowledge with the new things that you are learning with prior knowledge, and it makes it easier for you to recall even the new knowledge. Now, the habit of asking these intelligent questions is something that you have to develop. Why? Because it is actually uncomfortable and it is hard. At least for me, I have seen that my brain never wants to be in suspense. And so it seems very convenient to just passively read through everything, coming across new information, and you look at it and you're like, oh, there's even that, and then you go on. And the brain looks at that is like, it is in the working memory, and the brain will say, is this information important? Can I integrate it with prior knowledge? If not, remember, the working memory has got a specific capacity, and so it will just remove it so that it can accommodate the next things that you're reading. However, if I am going to spend time asking important questions that are going to help me integrate this knowledge to my prior knowledge, you discover that I can integrate it easily. And when I come to new concepts, this thing that I was reading previously is no longer just part of the things that are in the working memory. They are actually part of the prior knowledge, to the point that I can actually start integrating this new concept to the thing that I was reading. Now, again, I have to mention, this is a skill, and doing it actually is a technique, and I'll be teaching most of that. A lot of resources are out there to help you how you can ask intelligent questions and in a more systematic manner to make sure that this is practical. One of them is actually this book that I recommended, which I think I'm going to review. And if you think you would like to see that also, drop down a comment in the comment section, and maybe I may even make it my next video. In conclusion, may I just say, the ability to ask intelligent questions as you are studying is a skill, and it is a habit, meaning you can acquire it and it will take time. So meaning it is an issue of having self-awareness as you are reading, to make sure that you are not reading passively but asking important questions, to make sure that as you are asking those important questions, you are integrating the new information that you are learning with the prior knowledge that you have. And so that is it for today. And if you think this video was very important and good for you, subscribe, like, and share this video with a couple of friends. See you next time.